Good afternoon, class. Today I'm going to be doing my speech on French Emperor Napoleon Bonaparte. Napoleon was the first French emperor to ever live and is considered to be one of the greatest generals in history. But as everybody who's come into power, he did eventually lose it. He also was one of the main generals and or emperors who came close to conquering all of Europe. Born in Corsica and poor, Napoleon was born with French hatred in his blood, mostly because of the environment around it. At the time, Corsica had just been bought not too long ago, right? A year before he was born, by the French. And because of that, a lot of the Corsican people did not like the French, including Napoleon, who got most of his opinion from the Corsican public. Meanwhile, he had a terrible relationship with his dad because his dad was actually I guess in this case would be a patriot now, towards the French. So him and his dad already had a sour relationship, which probably led him to go to military school in French. His dad probably sent him there because of their bad relationship and because he had a love for the French. Needless to say, because of his beliefs and the way he thought about the French people, Napoleon was picked on at school. But according to sources, he had a bad attitude and often fought back. But he did well in school. At the age of 16, he became second lieutenant to an artillery regiment, but he had bigger ambitions. But sadly, because of the current political situation in France, which was a monarchy, he wasn't allowed to advance in the ranks. Back then, when it came to monarchies, usually nobilities advanced into rank before anybody that had actual talent. Napoleon couldn't do anything about that until the French Revolution happened. During the French Revolution, Napoleon sponsored a lot of the battles and he fought for the revolutionary side. He fought at the Siege of Toulon and the Paris Uprising, which gained him a lot of popularity and a lot of headway with the French people. Because of his position with the French people and his success with the French Revolution, other countries have started to take notice of him, and not just him, but also the French country. Most European countries were not happy that French was pushing these revolutionary ideals because most European countries at the times themselves had monarchies. This was a problem, and Napoleon stood at the center as somebody who was pushing revolutionary ideals because of his great victories during the French Revolution. Eventually, this caused the rest of Europe, to go to war with France, and this caused the First Coalition. During the First Coalition, Napoleon showed great military strategy and beat the complete snot out of Austria. And by the age of 28, he had completely pushed into Austrian territory and taken over it. The way he did this was by pushing through the Alps, which had only been done before by Hannibal, which was a Carthaginian leader. I think I massacred that country's name, but I don't even think it exists anymore. Hannibal had crossed the Alps as well, but it wasn't as clean as Napoleon's. Hannibal had done it at a time of great cold, a time called winter. And because of that, he had lost many men, unlike Napoleon, who only lost a few. Napoleon made it look like he was going to take over Italy, but instead he was welcomed by the Italian people because they just didn't like their Austrian oppressors. I have notes here. Anyway, after the First Coalition, he was hailed as a hero in France, which was good for him and bad for the government, for the French government, that is. The French government didn't like that the people were taking notice of Napoleon's victories, and they thought that he would grow in power, so they sent him to Egypt. In Egypt, he lost 2 battles to the British and then headed back to France. The thing is, not a lot of the French people heard about these battles because Napoleon was apparently a master at spreading propaganda, and somehow the people had heard the opposite about what happened in Egypt. Anyway, after his loss in Egypt, Napoleon went back to France, where he had trapped the current government with his brother somehow, and they had intimidated them into creating a new government. The new government consisted of 3 consuls, but after rewriting the rules, the only consul that really mattered was the first. And the first consul was Napoleon. Eventually, the second coalition happened, and then the third. And in all of them, Austria got their butts kicked. This led to Napoleon to marrying the Austrian princess, which led him to have a baby boy. In 1802, Europe was in peace. But that didn't last long, especially since Napoleon got a bit suspicious of his Spanish allies in the south, mostly because he did not trust the Spanish monarchy. Because his suspicions led him to put somebody else in charge, somebody that was in his family, which the Spanish people did not take kindly to. A Spanish uprising happened, and Napoleon started to lose land. During the 5th coalition, I think it was, he was finding himself surrounded. No, there was no more. It was during the 4th coalition, after he had taken over Austria, that he declared himself emperor. And it was during the 5th coalition that he had found himself surrounded by the British, the Austrians again, the Persians, and the Russians. I said Persians right there, but it's like Russians. It was like they owned Berlin at the time. Anyway, French destroyed Persians. They pushed into Russia, and they had also destroyed Austria again. Austria had lost all 6 times. I don't even know why they kept fighting. After they pushed into Russian territory, the Russian monarch at the time, Alexander, declared peace. And then that's when, after that, 1802 happened. There was peace, Spanish uprising, and then another coalition. This time, Napoleon lost one battle. It was against Austria again. And I believe he was also defeated. But he was sent to Al-Bad, a small island somewhere down south. After which, I think it was the British. The British reestablished another French king, which was, I think, King Louis XVIII, which was kind of a regression to the whole French Revolution thing. It was like nothing ever happened. Napoleon lived a good life in Al-Bad, or El-Bad, and he reconstructed a lot of its economy and its laws and made it prosper, but he wasn't happy because the man who had declared himself emperor also had a big ego and big ambitions. Eventually, he went back to France after fixing things up in Al-Bad, where he was welcomed again because the French people did not like their new king, King Louis. And he went to war again for the 6th coalition. This time, it was mostly against Austria, Persia, and the British. But since his main, we'll say his main battalion was near France, he was kind of pinched by mostly Austria and the British. Eventually, that led to the Battle of Waterloo, where he had lost his second major battle against the British and the Persians, which then opened the pathway to them to take over Paris. After they had taken over Paris, that's when Napoleon realized he had been defeated, and they moved them to a small island in St. Helena, where he had lived the rest of his days. Of course, after he had lost that battle, he had lost a lot. He lost access to his wife and children in Austria. The king of Austria had pushed for some other consort to push him. He lost all his factories, his land, and his country. But he was so powerful that a lot of the countries that went to war with him during the Fifth Coalition didn't declare war on France. They declared war on Napoleon as an individual. That's how much of a nuisance he was to their power. And for a while there, during the Fourth Coalition, he even made friends with Russian King Alexander for a while. Before, Russia went into an economic strife and had to start trading with the British again. That's kind of why Napoleon decided to invade Russia again, and when he started to lose. The thing is, he actually managed to take over Moscow. So that was extremely successful. The problem is that he stood there for too long, and when his troops who weren't accustomed to the cold started to experience winter, and they tried to retreat, Russia, or the troops that were more to the north, started to pursue them. Anyway, Napoleon's adventure kind of ended in St. Helena. He was mostly a nuisance to the European powers, which makes him okay in my book. It's too bad he just couldn't hold it.